Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this video we're going to be talking about what chord inversions are and when you might use them and why we have them. Chord inversions are a good way of spicing up your playing if you're playing something that involves a lot of chords. They are also something that show up a lot in pieces or in songs because they have a very particular sound. So in this video I'm going to show you what they are, how to use them and why you might want to use them. So the first thing that we have to understand is how to actually make any chord on the piano, and we can do this using something called a scale. So a scale is essentially a set of notes. You have one of each letter of the musical alphabet. And the scale that we're going to focus on is the scale of C major, and that's because this just has all of the white notes on the piano. You can find a C on the piano by finding the two black keys and then just playing the note that's to the left of those, the white key that's to the left of those. And from here, the note that you have after that is D, and then the note after that is E, F, G, A, B, and then you get back to C. And you may have noticed that when I got to G, I went to A, and that's because the musical alphabet is only the letters from A to G. So when you get to G, the letter after that is an A again, and then that continues up the piano. You just get A to G, A to G, A to G. So now that we know what notes we're going to be using in this scale, which is the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C, we can start to make a chord using these notes. And the way that you would normally construct a chord using these notes is by using the note 1, 3, and 5 of that scale. So in this case that would be the note C, E, and G. And this is called a C major chord. This is chord number 1 in the key of C major because it's based upon the note number 1 of the C major scale. This means that you can make 7 chords that will work in the key of C major because you can have one chord that starts on each of these notes. So you can have C major, a D chord, E, F, G, A, and then B, and then at that point you're back to C again, which is the same as the first one. So this is how you construct normal major or minor chords. Each of these chords in this scale are either major, minor, and there's one that's slightly odd, and that's a diminished chord, which is chord number 7. All of the rest of them, chords 1 to 6, are normal major or minor chords, and you can hear that the minor chords sound a little bit more dark or sad, and the major chords sound happier or a bit more light. So this is a C major chord, so this sounds more positive. And then D is a minor chord, so this sounds a bit more negative. So now that we have some chords that we can use, we can now start talking about inversions. So a chord inversion is essentially where you start reordering the notes so that it's not in that standard position. So normally a C major chord would be the notes C, E, and G, which is note 1, 3, and 5 of this scale. But if I wanted to reorder those notes and take the C off the bottom and put it on the top, this becomes a first inversion C major chord. So this is still a C major chord because it's still using the exact same notes, it's just in a different order, so that the E is at the bottom rather than the C. You can then repeat this process and take this first inversion chord and take the bottom note off again, which is now an E, and put that on top. So this now becomes a second inversion C major chord. Once again, it's still a C major chord because we're still using the exact same notes, it's just in a different order on the piano. You can apply this to any of the other chords on the piano, including the minor ones, so D minor. That's D minor in its 3 different inversions and its 3 different reordering of the notes. And in a nutshell, that is what chord inversions are. It's just reordering the notes of a chord so that there's a different note at the bottom each time. However, I think it's important to talk about exactly why we use these and when you might want to use these. So the first reason why you might want to use these is because our ear is trained to hear step motion rather than leaps as more satisfying. So you can actually get to most chords from another chord just by moving in steps if you are also considering the inversions. And I'll give you an example of this. So C major would normally be C, E, and G. If I want to go to G major, for example, which is chord number 5 in C, that's because G is the 5th note in C. If I want to go to a G chord, then I would have to jump up like this. This is quite a long distance from C major, so we can reorder the notes in the G chord in order to make them all just move by step from the notes in the C chord. So the notes in the C chord are C, E, and G, and I know that the notes in a G chord are G, B, and D. So what this allows me to do is find G, B, and D, but find the nearest G, B, and D to the C, E, and G that I was on. So if this is C, E, and G, I can just move to this chord, and this is still a G chord because it's still G, B, and D, but the notes are just reordered so that the C chord is much closer. And this is much more pleasing to the ear when you're listening to it. You can find a multitude of different chords and just go through a series of chords that only move by stepwise motion, and you can make something that actually sounds pretty good, something like this. And that's only moving by one step at a time, one key at a time from any of the notes. So that's one way that you can use chord inversions. The other way that chord inversions might be used is to alter the bass note rather than just the notes in the chord itself. So if I use a C major chord, again as an example, a C major chord would normally be C, E and G, and I can add a C in the bass because it's a C chord. However, if I change this bass note to one of the other notes, this changes the inversion because the bass note is now different. So if I now play an E in the left hand, that's still a C major chord, but it has a much more weak and different sound. And these types of chords and inversions where you change the bass note are used a lot to create a particular effect. This first inversion chord where you've got an E in the left hand of a C chord is used a lot to make something sound more longing. And then you can also use those types of chords around other chords to find the desired effect you want, something like this. And those types of chords really help that sense of longing within that texture. If you find that you are reading chord charts or something like that, you often see chord inversions written as the main chord and then a slash followed by the bass note. And this shows you the inversion that the song is actually wanting you to play. There is a lot you can do with chord inversions, and it's something that's definitely worth exploring if you haven't played around with chords or inversions before. A good way to practice chord inversions is by only allowing yourself to move by step at a time in both the right hand and the left hand, and see if you can find some chords that work with those notes. This is something that I do regularly. If I now play in a different key, so a different scale, a different set of notes, I might start with just chord number 1. I'll use G major for an example. So if I start with chord number 1, then I can try and move just by step to try and find the chords that work. If you have any experience with chord inversions or they're still confusing to you, then let me know in the comments and I'll try and do my best to help. And before you go into this video, be sure to hit me with a big like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.